Dawn crawled over the Sentinel Shield security compound, warming the concrete walls and catching the soft hum of generators that never slept. Operators moved through the courtyard with half-awake routines, adjusting gear, drinking coffee, shaking off the night. Major Ryan Keller stood near the center, giving quick instructions for the day ahead, his voice steady in the quiet morning air. Then a sharp crack cut the world in half. Keller staggered once, hands rising to his throat as blood sprayed between his fingers. He dropped before anyone understood what had happened. Silence lasted only a heartbeat before panic exploded. A second round tore through Captain Luke Harrington's chest plate, flipping him backward into the dust. Far up on Revenant Ridge, 800 meters out, muzzle flashes glinted like tiny sparks. 8 shooters, coordinated, precise. Deadly operators dove for cover as radios erupted with frantic shouting. Staff Sergeant Aaron Cole slid behind a stack of crates, dust streaking her cheek. Corporal Briggs yelled, "Supply girls useless, get inside." But Aaron didn't move. She just watched the ridge with a stillness the others didn't recognize. They didn't know the woman. They mocked once-hunted snipers for a living. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Sunrise had barely lifted over the desert when the compound came alive again. The same quiet rhythm it repeated every morning. The sky shifted from blue to gold, brushing the razor wire with soft light as generators thumped in steady loops. Far from the bustle of the operators, Staff Sergeant Aaron Cole unlocked the warehouse door and stepped inside, her silhouette slim and deliberate, her gray eyes taking a moment to adjust before she moved. At 38, she looked like someone who preferred shadows to attention, lean, steady, and silent. She walked with a kind of controlled grace that most people mistook for shyness. She carried no swagger, no bravado, nothing that marked her as anything but ordinary. That was exactly how she wanted it. Inside the warehouse, she went straight to her clipboard, scanning inventory numbers that she already knew by heart. Shelves were stacked perfectly, crates labeled in clean handwriting, everything in its place. Logistics was supposed to be simple, predictable, quiet. Aaron made sure it stayed that way. Operators passing by tossed casual remarks through the doorway, never cruel, but never respectful either. Corporal Ethan Briggs leaned in with a smirk, tapping his helmet. "Morning clipboard, Cole. Save the world with spreadsheets today." Sergeant Mia Lawson laughed as she walked past. "Be nice. She fights off his supplies, we don't have to." Aaron only nodded, pretending the joke slid off her shoulders. She always pretended. She kept her eyes down, her posture small, her breathing even. She moved like a person trying not to disturb the air around her. But the clues were there for anyone paying close attention. She positioned her desk so she could see both entrances without turning her head. She always chose the corner that gave her a clear view of the warehouse's long aisle. When a construction crew outside set off a loud metallic pop, she flinched before she could stop herself. Eyes snapping to the ceiling as if tracking direction and distance, she exhaled slowly until her heartbeat settled. Ben Travis, the compound manager, stepped inside, carrying a tablet thick with requests. He was tall, calm, and perpetually overworked, glasses slipping down his nose every time he read from his screen. "Cole, we've got royalty inbound," he said. "Victoria Kane, big tech powerhouse, high expectations, low patience." He handed her the list. Aaron scanned it once, her eyes moving quickly. Ardent room, secure comms line, backup power supply, special diet, emergency kits, and enough bottled water to hydrate an entire board meeting. "I'll have it ready by 1600, she said. Ben nodded, already trusting her promise. "I know you will. You always do." By mid-morning, she had transformed an empty concrete suite into something airtight and professional. She supervised the installation of armored glass, tested communication lines herself, checked food supplies, examined emergency lighting twice, and arranged every required item with quiet precision. She never rushed. She never wasted movement. Everything she touched settled into the exact place it needed to be. When she carried a box of updated radios to the operations center, the morning security briefing was already underway. Major Ryan Keller stood at the front, pointing a laser at a map projected on the wall. Operators filled the room, some alert, others fighting off early yawns. "This terrain here," Keller said, circling the jagged outline of Revenant Ridge. "Direct line of sight into our compound. If anyone wanted to hit us, this is where they'd set up." Erin paused in the doorway, her eyes drawn to the map. Without meaning to, she stepped closer, reading the terrain with an instinct she had spent years trying to bury. She mentally traced firing angles, counted distance markers, picked out dead ground. Her breathing slowed as muscle memory began whispering through her nerves. The room grew quieter. A few operators noticed her stare. Keller glanced over. "Cole, you need something?" She blinked and stepped back. "Just driving radio, sir." Briggs leaned toward Lawson, barely whispering, but loud enough for the room to hear. "Look at that. She thinks she's Delta." A few light chuckles floated across the table. Keller shook his head gently. "Thanks, Cole. We've got the tactical side covered." She nodded, keeping her expression neutral, and walked out before they could see how much her hands trembled. She hated that her instincts still lived under her skin, hated that a map like that could pull her right back into a life she had run from. The afternoon brought the VIP convoy rumbling through the gate, engines heavy and dust rising in thick clouds. Captain Luke Harrington's protection team fanned out with sharp precision, checking rooftops and corners while armored doors opened. Victoria Kane stepped out first, composed and sharp, eyes scanning the compound with impatience. Behind her followed Daniel Brooks, her pale and sweating chief financial officer, and Lauren Price, her assistant, clutching a tablet full of schedules. Amanda Reese, her security director, held a calm posture that said she had seen dangerous places before. Operators swarmed the area with practiced efficiency. No one noticed the quiet woman standing off to the side, arms crossed loosely, watching the choreography with a detached calm. Erin never expected them to. By nightfall, the compound settled into stillness again. The desert cooled, generators hummed, and lights cast long shadows across the walls. Erin returned to her small room beside the warehouse, hoping exhaustion would deliver sleep. But the moment she closed her eyes, the past rose up again. A cave entrance, the dry smell of dust and stone, a man with a rifle walking back to his hide, a small child clinging to his sleeve, her scope centered on the father's chest, her finger tightening, her hesitation lasting one heartbeat too long. And then the shot that killed her spotter, the scream she never forgot. The blood on her hands as she tried to stop the impossible. Erin sat up in the dark, breathing hard. She pressed her palms to her face, whispering to no one, "Not again, never again." Burst light slid over the desert in a slow, pale sweep, casting long shadows across the concrete walls as the compound stirred awake. On the east tower, Carl Jensen sipped lukewarm coffee and scanned the horizon through his binoculars. Most mornings were quiet, just goats, dust, and the occasional shepherd. But today, something snagged his attention. A lone figure stood on Revenant Ridge. He lowered the mug, raised the binoculars again, and focused. The figure didn't move like a hiker or a looter. Whoever it was shifted with precision, lowering themselves into a prone position, elbows settling into dirt with practiced confidence. Carl's voice crackled across the radio. "Ops be advised, possible contact on the ridge." One individual prone around 600 meters out. Static answered first, then Keller's voice. "Copy. Keep eyes on. Might be a local." Carl didn't respond immediately. Locals didn't lie that still. He adjusted the focus and froze when a second figure slid into view, belly crawling behind a rock. Then a third appeared higher up, then another. They spread like dark seeds across the ridge. "Ops," Carl said, voice tightening. "We've got more. At least 4, no 5. This is coordinated." Inside the warehouse, Erin Cole paused mid-step as her radio buzzed with the rising tension. She sat down the crate she was moving, walked to the small desk in the corner, and opened an old laptop she rarely touched, using a login Phil from it had once given her just in case. She tapped into the camera feeds. The grainy image of Revenant Ridge flickered onto her screen. Her pulse slowed, not sped up. Slowed the way it used to when the world narrowed around a rifle scope. One figure lay perfectly still in a hide. Another adjusted binoculars with deliberate, clean movements. A third was aligning a bipod, angling the barrel with textbook discipline. Erin whispered to herself, "Snipers." Then more of them appeared. U-678 spaced evenly overlapping fields of fire, high ground completely dominating the compound. She leaned closer to the screen, counting the meters instinctively, the numbers unspooling in her mind like a familiar prayer. 600, 700, 800, no wind yet. Mirage starting low. Good concealment, perfect kill zone, and they were settling in. Across the compound, Keller's voice hardened over radio traffic. All units, combat footing. Repeat, full combat footing. Boots hit concrete. Operators scrambled to positions. Arrington moved fast, gathering Victoria Kane and her team, ushering them toward the hardened room. Amanda Reese followed with calculated urgency. Briggs, meanwhile, jogged toward the courtyard, rifle bouncing against his armor. Probably just hunters with old junk rifles, he called out, trying to sound brave. But no one agreed. Not this time. Erin stepped outside the warehouse, her eyes locked onto the ridge. Even from here, with the naked eye, she saw faint glints of optics catching the morning light. Her breathing settled into a steady pattern she wished she'd forgotten. She mentally traced ballistic arcs, calculated angles, felt an old part of herself waking like a beast stretching after a long sleep. Then the world cracked open. A single shot tore through the air too fast to track, and Major Ryan Keller felt like someone had cut a string. Blood erupted from his throat in a violent spray, and he collapsed without a sound. The compound froze for a fraction of a second. Then chaos detonated. A second round slammed into Captain Harrington's chest plate, shattering ceramic, flipping him backward as the impact echoed through the courtyard. He gasped on the ground, armor fractured like broken glass. Sergeant Mia Lawson shouted and dove behind a generator as a ricochet sparked inches from her face. Corporal Briggs, who had been halfway across the courtyard, dropped into a hard roll, scrambling behind a parked SUV as rounds hammered the metal. Two operators near the tower went down in the opening barrage, one screaming, one silent. Radios erupted with overlapping voices. Man down, multiple, multiple. They're everywhere, taking heavy fire. I can't see them. Where is it coming from? Get the VIPs inside. Move. Erin ducked behind a concrete barrier as bullets snapped overhead, slicing the air with violent whips. Dust hit her face. Gravel bit into her palms and her mind shifted. Not panicked, not shocked. She went cold, focused. Every instinct she had buried roared to the surface, demanding control. Flashbacks flickered, short, sharp bursts of memory. She couldn't stop. Patrick Coleman whispering corrections beside her. A cave mouth, 600 meters away. The man with the rifle. The child standing beside him. Her hesitation, Patrick falling. Blood she couldn't stop. She blinked hard, pulling herself back. Voices screamed on the radio again. Among them, she heard Brian Hutchkins, calm father of two, always showing photos of his kids. Gasping, his voice thin and cracking. Hit chest, can't breathe. Someone help. Another crack echoed. His voice went silent. Erin shut her eyes for half a heartbeat. Then something inside her snapped. Not wildly, not emotionally, but with cold precision, like a switch being flipped after years locked away. She grabbed a radio. "Warren," she said quietly. The medic's voice was frantic. "Cole, what are you doing? Get inside. I can end this." Her voice was calm. Too calm. Operators overheard and fell silent on the channel. Warren hesitated. "What do you mean, end this?" Erin wiped dust from her cheek with the back of her hand. She looked toward the ridge, toward 8 professionals who thought they owned the battlefield. "I'm former Delta counter-sniper," she said. "Give me suppressing fire." The channel went dead quiet. Warren finally exhaled, shaky and disbelieving. "You're what?" But she didn't repeat herself. Through distant gunfire, her voice remained steady as steel. "Give me suppressing fire." It was the tone of someone giving an order she had given before. Warren reacted first. Maybe instinct, maybe desperation, maybe he heard something true in her voice. All units, he shouted, lay down suppressive fire on Revenant Ridge. Mao, operators obeyed immediately, unloading everything they had at the ridge. Dust explosions burst along the high ground. The snipers ducked behind cover, forced to pause their attack. Erin took her chance. She ran, not hesitantly, not panicked, but with the fierce, calculated motion of someone who had sprinted through real kill zones before. She zigzagged across open ground, timing her movements between the rhythm of incoming fire. Bullets tore into dirt behind her boots, snapped past her shoulder, sparked off metal. But she never slowed. Every step was a memory. Every turn was muscle memory. Every breath was a reminder of the person she once was, and the person she had to become again. She reached the armory door just as a round slammed into the wall beside her, spraying concrete chips across her arms. She hit the keypad, shoved the door open, and disappeared inside, heart steady, hands already knowing exactly which weapon she would reach for. The battle outside raged on, but the real war, the one only she could fight, was about to begin. Erin slammed the armory door behind her, breath steady, the outside chaos muffled by thick steel walls. The fluorescent lights flickered once overhead as dust drifted off her shoulders. She took 3 steps inside before realizing she wasn't alone. Linda Crawford, the admin clerk who handled access logs, stood frozen beside a shelf of first aid kits, a clipboard clutched to her chest. Her eyes widened as Erin strode past her without hesitation. "Cool, what are you doing?" Linda whispered, voice trembling. Erin didn't answer. She moved straight to the restricted keypad mounted on the inner cage, an override panel only leadership used. Without pausing, she punched in a code Linda had never seen her type, her fingers moving with absolute certainty. Beep, green light. Click. The cage unlocked. Linda's mouth fell open in shock. How do you know that code? But Erin was already moving inside, weaving through crates and racks with the unthinking familiarity of someone who had lived in armories far more dangerous than this one. She stopped exactly where she knew the rifle would be, the M2 den, the gun she had tried to forget. Her hand wrapped around the stock in one smooth, practiced motion. She didn't search, didn't look around, didn't hesitate. She simply reached for it like an extension of her own body. Linda stepped back, whispering, "Oh my God." Erin ignored the rising panic in the woman's voice. She lifted the rifle, checked the chamber blind with her thumb, and loaded the magazine with a soft, efficient click. Her fingers danced over the scope, adjusting windage by instinct. She didn't even look at the numbers. Her breathing slowed, each inhale precise, each exhale measured. Sniper breathing. Breathing she had sworn she'd never fall back into. She paused only once when her hand hovered over the bolt. A tremor ran through her fingers. A memory slipped forward. Patrick lying in Afghan dust. Blood pooling under his cheek, the echo of the shot she didn't take. Her jaw tightened. The moment passed. She closed the bolt quietly, like sealing away the ghost with it. Her radio crackled. It was Warren Blake, voice shaking under pressure, but holding steady for the wounded around him. "Cole, say the word." She glanced at the ridge through the armory's small window. Operators were still firing blindly, trying to keep the snipers' heads down, but blind bullets weren't going to win this. She lifted the radio to her lips. "Ceasefire in 10 seconds. Silence followed her command, a heavy, confused silence. Then distant shouting as operators relayed the order. Phil, from it listening on an open channel, whispered, "Why is she giving commands?" Mia Lawson in the battered tower whispered back, "How does she know any of this? How is she this calm?" Erin slung the rifle tight and sprinted out of the armory. She ran across the compound's inner yard, ducking low as stray rounds snapped overhead. Then she slipped into the administrative building, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Each step echoed faintly, the sound oddly steady, almost peaceful compared to the chaos outside. By the time she reached the top floor, her face had transformed completely. Gone was the quiet, unassuming supply clerk who counted ammo boxes and stocked water pallets. In her place was something sharper, calmer, colder. An old version of herself she had spent years suppressing. Her expression carried a heavy resignation, as if she knew she was crossing a line she could never uncross. Yet her eyes held a steadiness that felt carved from steel. Down below, operators noticed the shift without understanding it. Briggs, still crouched behind the SUV, looked up and saw her moving along the walkway toward the rooftop ladder. He frowned, unable to place the feeling climbing up his spine. Lawson murmured into her mic. "She's different," Warren whispered back. "No, she's trained." The shooters on the ridge were no longer firing into the compound. They had gone still, waiting for visibility through the haze, waiting to resume their assault with cold patience. Their temporary silence settled over the desert like a held breath. Aaron climbed the final ladder, pushing open the metal hatch to the roof as the last echoes of suppressive fire faded. 800 meters away, Revenant Ridge loomed quiet and deadly, its hidden killers repositioning in the shadows. The tension crawled across the compound like static electricity. This was no longer chaos. This was the pause before the real fight. And Aaron Cole, supply clerk, ghost of Delta, the woman no one believed in, stepped into the open air with the calm of an apex predator who had finally accepted what she was about to do. The ridge waited. She lifted the rifle. The desert held its breath. Aaron slid onto the rooftop, the heat of the metal seeping through her elbows as she crawled behind the low retaining wall. The compound stretched below her, operators scrambling, dust clouds rising, broken shouts crackling over the radios. Revenant Ridge dominated the horizon, jagged and sun-scorched, its shadows hiding 8 professionals who believed no one in the valley could touch them. She set the M210 against her shoulder. The familiar weight settled into her bones. The world tightened into a tunnel scope. Sight picture, breath, trigger. Everything else faded. Her cheek pressed to the stock. The eye relief was perfect on the first try. Her right hand slid under the rifle with the same gentle certainty of someone who had done it thousands of times. Her left adjusted the bipod angle. Her breathing slowed into that old mechanical rhythm she thought she buried in the Afghan mountains. Inhale 2 seconds. Exhale steady. She swept the scope along the ridge in one smooth, fluid motion. There, the first sniper, only a fraction of a shoulder, peeked from behind a rock, barely enough to see, much less hit. But Aaron didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. She listened to the wind with her skin, felt the temperature shift on the rooftop, watched how the rising heat warped the air near the ground. Wind 3 knots left. Mirage pulling slightly upward. Distance 670 meters. She dialed the correction without thinking. She exhaled halfway. Triggered. The rifle cracked. A deep, controlled thunder that rolled across the compound. 2 seconds later, the sniper's shoulder vanished. The man collapsed backward out of sight. A perfect first-round kill. Radios across the compound went dead silent. In the courtyard, Briggs froze mid-reload. "What was that?" Mawson whispered. "That came from the admin roof." Aaron didn't hear them. She was already on target too. This one was smart, buried behind thick brush, careful angles, barely any outline. She caught movement, a single leaf shifting from the pressure of his clothing as he adjusted his rifle. That was all she needed. Inhale, exhale, trigger. A puff of leaves jumped as the round passed through. The sniper's body slumped sideways into the brush. 2 shots, 2 kills. Below her, Mia Lawson nearly dropped her radio. Is someone actually hitting them?" Phil from it whispered, stunned. "That's impossible. We can't even see them." But Aaron could. She saw everything. She moved to Sniper 3. This one was relocating. Smart move. Trying to change elevation to avoid counterfire. But movement was always a sniper's enemy. He darted between 2 boulders, planning to settle on the far edge. Aaron watched his predicted path. She calculated his speed, the slope, the short pause he'd take before settling. She fired before he emerged. The round met him mid-step. The man's body folded unnaturally as he crumpled between the rocks. Operators watching through binoculars went silent with shock. Whoever's doing that, that's not normal shooting, Briggs breathed. Aaron kept moving. 4 snipers left hidden, 3 exposed, 1 invisible. Number 4 was the invisible one. He was good, too good. He had dug himself into a depression behind a flat slab of stone using natural shadow and terrain to vanish. A professional. Someone trained like she was trained, may be better. Aaron scanned slowly, patiently. She adjusted zoom, shifted her angle, waited for any sign. A glint, the faintest shimmer of a scope lens catching morning light for just a heartbeat. Got you. Wind rising to 5 knots. Mirage stronger. Distance 723 meters. High precision shot. Her breath stilled. Patrick's voice washed through her memory. Calm, low, steady behind her. You've got it. Don't chase the shimmer. Chase the seer behind the shimmer. She aligned the shot exactly where he would have told her. Trigger. The glint disappeared instantly. A dark shape rolled sideways in the dirt. 4 down. A tremor touched her fingers, not from nerves, but from the ghost that had returned to sit at her shoulder. Patrick's face flickered behind her eyes again. Dust in his hair, blood on his neck. The last warning he tried to give her before collapsing. She swallowed it down. She couldn't break now. Snipers 5 and 6 had clearly realized something was very wrong. They abandoned their hides and sprinted upslope, trying to escape over the ridge crest. Their panic made them sloppy. Aaron tracked the first runner with smooth precision. He ran straight away. Easy math. She led him by a few feet, timing his stride and the rise of the hill. Crack. He pitched forward, face first into the dirt. The second runner tried to move laterally, smart enough to use terrain undulation for partial cover, but Aaron watched his rhythm, the way he favored his left foot. The moment he'd have to break from one rock to the next, she fired the instant he crossed open space. He dropped before even understanding that someone was hunting them. 6 down. Below her, operators stared in disbelief. Briggs's voice shook. That's not possible. Nobody shoots like that, Lawson murmured. She's not who we thought. Still, Aaron didn't hear them. She was already tracking Sniper 7, the one trying to escape over the highest part of the ridge. This one was nearly 800 meters out, pushing the limits of even the best shooters. Heat shimmer curled the air. Dust swirled. Small rises in the terrain distorted the sight picture. But Aaron adjusted. She slowed her breathing until her heartbeat barely lifted her chest. She adjusted the elevation turret 4 clicks. Corrected for mirage. Calculated bullet drop instinctively. It wasn't math, it was art. She squeezed the trigger. 2 seconds later, the figure at the radius jerked violently and fell backward out of view. 7. Only 1 remained. He was buried deep. So deep even Aaron couldn't initially spot him. His hide was perfect. A shadowed depression behind 2 overlapping rocks that shielded any direct visual. For a moment she scanned carefully, frustration flickering at the edges of her calm. Then Mia's voice crackled through the radio, breathless. I've got thermal. Marking location with tracers. Watch the right side of the ridge. A line of green tracer fire arced upward, stitching between 2 stones. Aaron aimed at the bracketed zone. The last sniper hesitated for 1 fatal second, trying for a revenge shot, shifting just enough to find a line of sight on one of the operators below. That motion exposed half of his forearm. That was all she needed. Crack. The final sniper's arm snapped back violently as he collapsed into the dirt. Dust puffed where he fell. The tracer fire stopped. Silence washed across the compound, real silence. No gunfire, no shouting, just dry wind creeping over the walls. Then the voices started shaky, disbelieving, odd. 8 shots, 8 kills. Who was she? Briggs's voice trembled. That was impossible. Someone else whispered, she's not supply, she's something else. Down below, every operator looked toward the rooftop as if seeing it for the first time. Respect hadn't replaced doubt yet. Not fully, but it was moving, building, rising like a tide. They couldn't hold back. They didn't know the full truth. Not yet. But they knew one thing. The quiet supply clerk they ignored had just eliminated a nightmare team of elite snipers in less than 12 minutes, and nothing about the world felt the same anymore. Erin stayed prone behind the low wall long after the final sniper dropped. Her breathing stayed slow, steady, precise. She scanned every inch of Revenant Ridge to her scope, refusing to trust silence too quickly. Dust drifted across the rocks. Heat shimmered. No movement, no glint of glass, no shifting silhouette. Only 8 still forms lying in the sand, swallowed by distance. Finally, she eased her finger off the trigger and lifted her cheek from the stock. But she didn't stand. Not yet. A sniper always watched a little longer. Boots clattered on the metal ladder behind her. Warren Blake pulled himself onto the rooftop, shoulders heaving from the climb, medical gloves still stained from the wounded he had just treated. He froze when he saw her. The calm posture, the rifle at rest beside her, the expression of someone who hadn't just survived a fight, but mastered it. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Cole, who trained you?" She didn't look up at him immediately. She watched the ridge one last time, then finally rose to her knees. Her face was unreadable, but something old and heavy had settled behind her eyes. "Delta," she said, quietly. 6 years. Counter-sniper detail. Warren's lips parted slightly as if the words didn't want to process. His gaze flicked from her hands to the rifle to the ridge where 8 bodies lay cooling. "Jesus," he breathed. Below the rooftop, operators gathered, drawn by Warren's stunned silence and the eerie stillness from above. Mia Lawson was first to reach the base of the ladder. Eyes narrowed as she stared upward. Briggs arrived seconds later, helmet crooked, dust smeared across his jaw. Others clustered behind him, staring at the roof like it was sacred ground. Mia whispered, "She's Delta." Briggs didn't answer. His face drained as pieces fell into place. The jokes, the dismissals, the times he'd laughed at her back. His head lowered, shoulders sinking as shame carved into him. "She saved every one of us," he muttered, "and I treated her like she didn't belong." Footsteps approached from the courtyard, swift, sharp, urgent. Amanda Ree, the VIP security director, pushed through the crowd and stopped dead when she saw Erin rising from behind the wall. Her breath caught, her hand lifting slightly as if to steady herself. Ree stared. Then recognition struck her like a hammer. "I know you," she whispered. I've seen your file." Erin didn't move, didn't confirm, didn't deny. Ree stepped closer to the ladder, her voice barely audible. "You're the one they called Ghost Line." A hush rippled through the courtyard. That name, spoken quietly, reverently, fearfully, hit the operators like a shockwave. Ghost Slime, a code name whispered in certain circles. A myth among counter-sniper units. A rumor about a shooter who never missed, who erased threats others couldn't even see. Every head turned upward, every voice stilled. The truth settled over the compound like dust after a bomb blast. She wasn't the supply clerk. She wasn't the quiet woman in the warehouse. She wasn't the forgettable background figure people brushed past without noticing. She was one of the most lethal counter-snipers the United States had ever produced, a woman who disappeared from classified reports years ago, assumed retired, assumed gone. Yet here she was on a rooftop in the desert holding a rifle that still smoked faintly from the shot that had saved them all. And in that stunned silence, awe replaced doubt, respect replaced mockery, and the entire compound felt the weight of who had just revealed herself. Ghostline wasn't a myth. She was real, and she had just saved their lives. Erin descended the ladder slowly, boots touching each rung with controlled, deliberate steadiness. The rifle hung across her chest, still warm. Below, the gathering of operators stepped back instinctively, parting down the middle without speaking, forming a quiet path she hadn't asked for. No one made eye contact at first, not out of fear, out of reverence. Captain Luke Harrington, pale and fighting to stay upright with a shattered chest plate, pushed himself against the side of a vehicle. His breath hitched, but he managed to straighten just enough to bring his hand to his brow. A salute, trembling but genuine. The courtyard froze slowly. One by one, others followed. Mia Lawson, Carl Jensen, Todd Garrett, even the youngest of the team whose hands still shook from the firefight. Their salutes rose unevenly, some crisp, some heavy with emotion, but all pointed toward the woman they had once ignored. Erin paused at the bottom of the ladder. She didn't return the gesture, not immediately. Her eyes drifted past them toward the far end of the courtyard where medics nape beside still bodies covered with tarps. Major Keller, Brian Hutchkins, two others who hadn't made it to cover in time. The sight pulled her breath in tight, her chest aching with the familiar weight she had carried from another battlefield years ago. She finally raised her hand in a slow, respectful return salute, one meant for the fallen, not for herself. Briggs stepped forward last. Dust streaked his face. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. He swallowed hard before he spoke, voice small for the first time since anyone had met him. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." He looked at the ground. "I didn't know. I didn't." Erin shook her head gently. "You weren't supposed to," she said. Her tone wasn't sharp. It wasn't cold. It was soft, almost tired. "I chose to stay hidden. The jokes didn't hurt me. They reminded me that I wasn't her anymore." Briggs blinked quickly, fighting emotion. "But you came back for us." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. A distant thumping rose above the compound, the chopping rhythm of helicopter blades. Operators instinctively stepped aside as a black Sentinel Shield helicopter descended in a swirl of dust. When it landed, the door slid open and Regional Director Samuel Walsh stepped out, his suit jacket whipping in the rotor wash. Walsh scanned the courtyard like a man entering a war zone, and then his gaze locked onto Erin. His brows drew together, confusion shifting to disbelief as he noticed the rifle in her hands. The operator standing back, the bodies on the ridge now visible in the distance. "What happened here?" he demanded, voice sharp. Warren Blake stepped forward. "Sir," she did. Walsh stared at Erin as though seeing a ghost. "Cole, explain." She didn't hesitate. She stood straighter, shifting the rifle to her side. Her voice became clinical, detached, not cold, just disciplined. "First sniper, 6'7" minimal exposure, neutralized by wind-corrected shoulder shot. Second sniper concealed behind brush, visible shift of vegetation. Third sniper caught mid-reposition. Fourth scope glint. Fifth and sixth fleeing predicted movement led targets accordingly. Seventh 800 YD crest shot with elevation and mirage compensation. Eighth thermal bracket from tower input fired when target repositioned for second shot. Each sentence was crisp, exact, unembellished. Operators watched the regional director's face tighten with every detail, shock calcifying into awe. Walsh looked back toward the ridge, toward 8 distant specks that had once been elite killers. "You eliminated all of them?" he asked quietly. Erin nodded once. "They would have killed everyone here if I didn't." Walsh exhaled slowly, heavily, like someone who finally understood the magnitude of what he was standing in the middle of. "Everyone on this compound is alive because of you," he said. The courtyard went silent again. Even the helicopter rotor seemed to hush. Erin didn't bow her head in pride. She didn't straighten in triumph. Briggs stayed fixed on the bodies covered by tarps. "I couldn't save everyone," she whispered. "Not this time either." A shadow crossed Walsh's face, sympathy mixed with realization. She wasn't some warehouse clerk with a good shot. She was a legend who had tried to disappear, a warrior who had fled from herself. A name buried in classified files and whispered in briefing rooms. And now, with 8 bodies on a ridge and a compound full of stunt operators, her old identity stood fully exposed. Ghostline was no longer a myth. She was standing right in front of them, holding the rifle that proved exactly who she really was. The compound was quiet by late afternoon, the kind of quiet that felt too heavy to breathe. Medics had carried the wounded inside. Teams had secured the perimeter. Operators spoke in hushed voices. still replaying what they'd witnessed. But Erin walked alone. She followed the same path the attack had carved, her boots crunching over gravel and spent casings. When she reached the spot where Major Keller had fallen, she stopped. A dark stain marked the ground, dried now, but still raw to look at. Keller had trusted this team, trusted the ridge, trusted the morning. She closed her eyes for a moment in silent respect, the weight of memory settling deeper across her shoulders. Farther along, she found Brian Hutchkins' helmet lying on its side, dust coating the surface. His name tape was still visible. She knelt, brushing the dirt gently away. Ryan had talked about his kids every chance he got. 2 little ones. One had a birthday coming up. Erin swallowed hard, placing the helmet upright before rising again. Her steps took her to the furthest edge of the compound, where the wall cast a long shadow. From there, Revenant Ridge stretched across the horizon, its jagged outline sharp against the sky. 8 bodies still lay motionless, waiting for retrieval teams to arrive. In the still air, they looked like dark stones scattered across the ridge. She let out her breath that trembled at the edges. "Patrick," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I'm sorry it took me this long." The ridge didn't answer. It never had, but she felt something shift inside her, an ache she had carried for years, loosening just enough to breathe through. She leaned her hands against the warm concrete. She had tried to bury that part of her life, tried to hide in logistics, stacking crates and organizing shelves as if order could erase memory. She told herself she wasn't a weapon anymore, that she couldn't be trusted with one. But today had shattered that illusion. When people needed her, instinct rose. Training returned. The old reflexes stepped forward without asking for permission. She had become the thing she feared most, the sniper who never missed. But she had also saved them. The narrator's voice reps softly around the moment. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers through trembling hands and quiet resolve. Strength isn't always visible. Sometimes it hides behind humble sleeves and silent footsteps. And some heroes walk quietly among us, unnoticed, underestimated, until the moment they're needed most. Erin lifted her gaze to the ridge one last time. Then she turned back toward the compound, ready to carry the weight of who she truly was. Some of the greatest warriors you'll ever meet look like ordinary people. They don't brag, they don't boast. They move through the world quietly, carrying their battles in silence until the moment someone's life depends on them. And when that moment comes, they step forward without hesitation, guided not by glory, but by a promise they made long ago. Stories like Erin's remind us that courage often wears the simplest uniforms, that strength can live behind soft voices and unseen scars, and that the heroes we overlook are sometimes the ones who save us all. To every service member and veteran watching, thank you. Your sacrifices, your discipline, and your quiet acts of courage continue to protect and inspire us. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories. These stories keep their courage alive for generations to come.